Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I think you guys are in the right room, especially if you want to learn about strength and conditioning. That's what I'm here to talk about. I'm excited for two reasons today. Number one is this is my first time ever on BYU property. So I don't know. I didn't go to the U. I don't know why. I grew up in Salt Lake County. Never been down here. And number two, for the next 45 minutes, well, in this case, 50 minutes, which is great, we're going to talk about what I'm passionate about, and that's going to be strength and conditioning, specifically for youth. So to get started, who here is a parent of a child? Raise your hand. Okay. Who's a child in this room that plays a sport? Okay. It looks like 50-50. And who here doesn't have any kids but wants to learn about strength and conditioning? Okay, we got a few of those too. Great. Awesome. So I want to start the presentation out with a study. So I want to keep this like as digestible as possible. I'm not going to get into like a lot of the science stuff unless you have a specific question for me, because sometimes that's super hard to digest. But the first study I want to talk about is by Raj Chetty and colleagues, and they took 12,000 kindergartners. And out of those 12,000 kindergartners, they predicted the income in their 20s by the amount of education their kindergarten teacher had. And that wasn't because that kindergarten teacher educated them. It was because that kindergarten teacher taught the necessary character building skills for each kindergartner. And the reason why that's important is because we've established so clearly in literature, other literature, that the most powerful force for adolescent mental health is a very strong and caring adult. So that's why we're all here. That's what Matt was talking about in his presentation. Well, let's jump into it. So I'm going to get through these first couple slides pretty quickly, and then we can get into more of the meat and potatoes of things. But today's goals. We're talking about what it means to be evidence-based, the importance of developing movement skills for athletes, and how to make learning the skills enjoyable for kids. She's right there, by the way. Thanks for coming. All right. Okay, so along with kind of to build on that, so the evidence-based portion, we're going to talk about these three things: the research, the theory, and the practice. There'll be a whole slide on it. We're going to go into depth about it. What does strength and conditioning look like for youth? What avoiding injury looks like? Any myths and misconceptions? How to make training enjoyable for youth? And then we're going to have a Q&A. And I'm a very open book when it comes to Q&A. So if you guys have questions in the middle of the presentation, you want to raise your hand, I can call on you, or maybe Caleb, he's my assistant today, he can let me know that someone's going to ask a question, and we'll go over it. So some important reminders. This is a focus for youth athletes, mainly adolescent, 8 to 17 years old. I do deal with any age really when I train specifically for our personal training, but athletes make up a decent part. I'd say about 65-70% of my training load. But I still see every age, so I can relate to anything, 50, 60, 70. My oldest client is 76 right now. My youngest is 12. So I see all ages. And something to keep in mind too, so I want you to put your critical thinking caps on, because there isn't, like you should always think, okay, if you read a study or see a post on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you're at, and you see something that's like, stretching my hamstring is going to do X for injury reduction, I would ask a question on top of that. Don't take that in full form and think, that's it. Because that's not, there's always new literature that comes out on strength conditioning. And strength conditioning is very new. It's like in 1970s is kind of when it started to popularize. So that's 50 years, right? Okay, and then this specific presentation is going to be for anyone that is involved with youth development, youth athletes, etc. So if you're a coach, if you're a parent, if you're a child that does a sport, this is perfect. And put your critical thinking cap on. So it's okay to ask questions. Okay. This stood out to me because, I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you look at the list of presenters on here, I'm the only one without a PhD. Okay, so I was kind of like, oh, wow. I know, right? So Dale Carnegie, if you're not familiar with that author, he wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this quote stood out to me: knowledge is not power until it is applied. So knowledge, you've heard knowledge is power, right? But until you apply that knowledge, that's when it's extremely, extremely powerful. So I train all day, every day, Monday through Saturday. and up to 12 clients a day. So I'm seeing an array of people, all ages. And I'm applying, the knowledge that I have is my experience, 12 years into it, which we're gonna go over. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because I was looking at this slide. But I lost my train of thought, but we're good. Okay, so experience, So 12 years in this, and a lot of courses, a lot of reading, a lot of videos. If I don't know anything specifically on sleep or physical therapy, or if a client comes into me and has a knee issue, I'm not gonna say, I know what to do with that, but like, that's, okay, we're gonna talk about that too, but I'm not going to talk about knee injuries without making sure that I'm confident enough to know about a knee injury. So I'm gonna reach out to a physical therapist. The amount of connections that I have in this industry is phenomenal. I have a lot of connections in different aspects of this industry. Okay, so let's talk about me. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but I own a private training facility in Bluffdale, Utah, so I'm about 30 minutes from here. I have a banner, so this is my Instagram too. Just a side note, if you guys wanna take photos, videos of any presentation or slide that's up here, or anything that we talk about today, you can tag me, you can not tag me, whatever, but that's how you can find me if you have any other questions after this. So in that facility, in my gym, I have a banner. And I put a banner up, which I can show you. That's the banner. So I have the banner, and then I have shirts hung. So the banner has everybody that comes into my gym and works out, whether you bring a friend, whether you come one time or come multiple times, you're signing this banner. Right now I have 580 signatures on this banner, and that's repeat clients, that's one-time clients, but the thought is I'm developing a culture around what I'm doing. So if your name is up there, like, it's very cool for them to think, hey, you get to sign the banner now after you work out. These shirts right here, I have about 40 plus shirts. These shirts are anyone who have I trained that have gone to a college for their sport. So that's not in high school, that's a college. That could be JUCO, D3, D2, D1, and then one pro lacrosse guy, look, he plays lacrosse. So let's go back to about me. Like I said, so I've been doing this for 12 years. I have skin in the game. I've been around so many different people, and I like to think I know what I'm talking about. This is some of my certifications. So NASM, if you're not familiar, National Academy of Sports Medicine. FRC stands for Functional Range Conditioning. That's more on the mobility side or flexibility side. That stands for, Functional Range Conditioning. So what that is, I went to Vegas for 2 days, spent time in the UFC Performance Institute with some UFC fighters, which is my dream because that's probably the only sport that I watch. And I've had thousands of sessions trained, probably tens of 20s of thousands sessions trained. My specialization is in strength, performance, and durability. So strength, we're gonna talk about. Performance, we're gonna talk about. That's sprinting, that's jumping. Durability, that is maybe the older client who wants to play pickleball and wants to just be really good at playing pickleball. I'm gonna make you durable so that your Achilles, your knee, all this is really healthy and really good. I had a stint in powerlifting for 5 years. These, if you care, are my lifts at 148 pounds. So right here, this bench press, that's what I was the best at. That's what I have, all the state records, national records. And that at the time was a world record, but I think it's been broken. So this is kind of where my love for building strength, building performance started. I'm a husband and father to 2 girls and 1 little boy. And I'm a part-time DJ, which somebody alluded to earlier. If you guys don't want, this is my Instagram, Sound Lab Utah. But anyways, and this is kind of the past and current stuff that I'm doing. So I have done one bodybuilding or physique show, powerlifting. I had a stint in Olympic lifting, competed in a state tournament or a state championship here for Olympic lifting. If you don't know what that is, that's snatch and clean and jerk. I've done kettlebell training, sprint training, plyometric. These are my stats with plyometric, or jump training, 32-inch vert, 35-inch approach. And if you don't know what that is, I can maybe show you. But and I'm currently training for a 5K, so this is completely new to me. I am very built on this strength. My body is very built on the muscle fibers that are gonna get me through strength, not running. It's so hard. Okay, and we looked at this, the banner, the shirts, and I put this up as a poll on my Instagram months ago, knowing that I was gonna do this specific presentation. And like Matt alluded to in there, burnout is a major thing in sport. So I put this up, and this is the exact thing. This is screenshotted from the Instagram. 85% of, I don't know how many people exactly this was, but it was a good chunk. And I would assume they were youth. 85% said that they experienced some sort of burnout in their sport. And that may be because you specialized early. That may be because you're having a bad experience with a coach. I don't know what that specifically was from, but that's a huge percentage that kids have burnout in their sport. And for the adults in the room, you're kind of looking at the future here you kids are. Did lifting at a young age contribute to living a healthy lifestyle now? And 92% said yes. And that was specifically for the adults. So adults in here, do you feel like if you lifted at a young age, are you now physically, we're healthy, we're lifting, we're working out, we had a good influence at a young age. And I like to bring up this slide. When I go and talk to schools, I bring this up because so many kids in high school are like, I want to play college, I want to play pro. These are the numbers. You can find if you want to take a picture of this or whatever, but you can find your sport here that you play, men and women. You can look at how many high school participants are in this sport, each sport. You can look at overall percentage of those high school kids make it to NCAA. That's D1, D2, D3. That's not a big percentage. So what I say is you need to do something that extremely stands out against other kids, your coaches, your parents. Do things that stand out. Start lifting. Start working on things that are your weakness. Start maximizing your strengths. But that is not a very big percentage, so you need to work very hard. Specifically, I work with a lot of women's soccer, so we kind of talk about that a lot. And then I know what you're thinking. What about pro? Here we go. So out of the number of NCAA is college, of participants, this is the percentage that go pro based on look at that, women's soccer, under 1% go pro. To be under one, that is, you have to be insane. So you have to do things to really maximize what you are doing. Okay, now we get into this. What does it mean to be evidence-based? This is what I like to reference, the 3-stool leg test, when we talk about what it means to be evidence-based. I'm not sure if you guys have been scrolling through Instagram or TikTok and have seen something that says evidence-based, but let's go over what that means. So we take research, which is also noted here in evidence, we take theory, and we take practice. So these are the description of what each of these means. You have to, if you have all 3 stools, or all 3 legs on this stool, it's a good idea to implement that. And it probably means it's pretty strong evidence. Or it's a pretty strong thing that you can implement. 2 of 3, it likely works depending on their strength. If you only have 1 of 3, it probably doesn't work. So that's where you're thinking, that's where you kind of can backpedal and think, oh, I saw a study, this is your research, that says X, Y, Z, but it's only just come out and it's so new, it hasn't been put into practice, or, it mainly hasn't been put into practice. So there's a very slippery slope when it comes to research and evidence-based and what it means to be that. But evidence generates new knowledge. So like Matt alluded to in his beginning presentation, he's doing a study with the Lehigh volleyball team. Now that evidence might come out, but until that's then put into practice or put into use and to see if that is backed and if that's trustworthy, then that's super solid. And I don't doubt that that's going to be a very good thing to be studying. Theory provides framework for the understanding the research, and practice applies the knowledge in a real-world context. So down here, the key is to understand how to use the science. So we want to have a good level of science research and a good level of coaching expertise, and that will give us a very solid evidence-based approach. Any questions so far? I feel like I'm talking fast because we got time, but okay. All right, now let's go into the importance of developing movement skills for young athletes. To be bigger, faster, and stronger. Whether you're male or female, I've seen both sides. They want to be bigger, faster, stronger. Female, typically not the bigger side. Faster and stronger, yes, for all the above, female and for male. To jump higher, to run faster, to reduce injury, to expose them to various and diverse movements that are challenging and engaging. Use body weight first to hit the big weight in the future. So we're going to talk about that also, long-term athletic development, and to build coordination. The amount of times I have this warm-up that I go through with all of the youth athletes coming in, and maybe they have never worked out before, maybe they have, and I say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do some pogos going forward, lateral, backwards, and then we're going to skip I'm like, okay, let's skip for height. So then they're like, skip for height. And then I'm like, skip for distance. You take this kid and have him go skip for distance and see if he can actually do it. Chances are, like, the amount of times that they cannot even skip for distance is shocking. So that's part of the coordination part that we're going to talk about. All right. Okay. Long-term athletic development and skill acquisition. That's what LTDA or LTAD stands for. Long-term athletic development. I harp on this massively. And we can read this. Gale's law states that complex systems that work effectively invariably evolve from simpler systems. So that's saying do the simple stuff first, then the complex stuff will be much easier to accomplish. In the context of sports coaching, this means that the most successful training programs start with basic, well-understood principles. Remember this. The most successful training programs start with basic, well-understood principles. These programs then evolve, adding layers of complexity only once the foundational elements are established and functioning well. So I had somebody call me yesterday and say he was interested in doing training with his 2 daughters. And he said, so what is your program like? Is it more specific to the sport, or what is that like? And I told them exactly this, that depends. How much experience do your daughters have? And they were younger, so I would assume very little training experience. And then I alluded to building the basics is the most important thing that you could do for a child in order to progress them into this long-term athletic development. That's exactly what long-term athletic development means, is I want a child to be very strong, fast, jump higher. You know, we're going to get there. And when they hit college, when they hit high school, I'm looking at the bigger picture. When they hit that college, they're going to be doing things that we're not going to be doing here in the basic stage. But the goal should be develop long-term, don't develop short-term, don't look for an easy fix, don't look for instant gratification, because you're going to run into an array of different problems if you try and do that. All right. We're going to talk about these. Probably why you guys are all here. If you guys are expecting also for me to be like, here's a workout plan that you guys can do, I'm not going to do that, because there's so many different factors that come into play. I mean, if you have a question specifically, I'll answer that and I can help you, guide you, but that's not the goal. I want to give you a good structure to base from so that you can potentially create a program or reach out to somebody, or more specifically know if you're getting your child in with a good strength coach or if they have a good sport coach in school. All right, so let's touch on these. Now, I could talk about this one for way more than 45 minutes, but this is, I'm not going to read all these benefits. You can look at those benefits, but let's talk about, we'll start at the FAQ. So when can you start strength training? My rule of thumb is if your child is old enough to play a sport, they can strength train. Strength train has many different meanings. So I'm not saying that we're going to take that 11-year-old and go load them up on a back squat and see how much they can squat. We're going to go over body weight squat, body weight lunge, pogo jumps, different directional jumps. Back to that long-term athletic development and skill acquisition, that's what our focus is. And if you think about strength, the other thing that I like to teach is skill acquisition is your primary driver of strength. So the better you can develop a skill, the higher your strength ceiling is going to become. When I was powerlifting, I was reading books, I was watching videos. I was trying to figure out what can make me a better bench presser. And you know what? A lot of it has to do with physics too. So physics plays a huge role in strength and becoming stronger and developing skill. So you can start strength training when they can play a sport. It could be 8, it could be 7, I don't know. I mean, my daughter dances at 6 right now, so she can technically start doing that. What about the growth plates? So this is a big common, I would say, misconception, and I don't know where it kind of stemmed from, probably in the 1970s, 80s, but there is little to no research to state that strength training will affect their growth plates. If anything, it will do the opposite. It will increase bone density. It will help tendons and ligaments. It'll help with this injury prevention or reduction. So I would not be too concerned about that. And if anybody has any adverse research, show me. Okay, so this is a topic that I kind of need to be careful talking about. But so if this quote or this saying is more directed towards sport coaches in high schools. And this gets me super fired up because we're going to have a whole slide on this actually, so I don't want to talk about this into depth. But when you have a freshman in high school go lift with their football team, and they have this coach who's, I'm just stereotyping here, but who's big and brawly and it's just all about lifting, but they're a sport coach. The last thing they should be doing is taking advice they did when that person was in high school and applying it to what they're doing now. That's very poor advice. That's very poor training. It's not good. Okay, so what about injury prevention? Now, I'm not going to touch a whole lot on this because Carrie, I don't know if she's still in this room. Yeah, Carrie's right here. She's going to be after me talking about injury, like all sorts of it. Okay, cool. So I don't like to use the word injury prevention, which is why it's in quotations. I like to use the word injury reduction because we can't really prevent anything if we don't know. We can know mechanisms on how injuries can happen, but it's really hard to prevent something. So what we can do is we can reduce something. Now, I'm going to skip over to this slide really quick. This is what I like to also, I have a whiteboard in my gym which I can draw all these different things. And this is what I like to talk about in regards to injury reduction. An injury typically happens when load exceeds the capacity of whatever that is, whether that's a knee, ankle, shoulder, wrist, anything you can think about, when the load exceeds the capacity. So if your capacity, if it's low, it probably cannot handle a bunch of load. It can only handle as much load as this joint is capable of handling. So what can we do to increase this capacity? Any ideas? Exactly. Nailed it. So we can strength train to increase the capacity of a joint or a soft tissue or anything. And when we think about joints too, we want to think about what your tendons and your ligaments are the ones supporting the joint. So your muscle, tendon connects muscle to bone, and ligaments are around there doing, they more so, think of the ACL, they more so reduce motion. So ACL is probably a big injury that a lot of you have either experienced or know someone that has experienced, but injury in ACL mechanism is hyperextension, so when my knee goes back, or when the bottom half of my leg rotates one way and the top half rotates the other way. So we know how an ACL injury happens, but as much as we can do to prevent it, we don't know. Like, it still happens, which is sad. But okay, so let's talk about the principles of strength training. To be individual with the person you're training, people have different responses to the same training stimulus. So if I have a male here and a female here, and I try and put them on the same exact volume and intensity, they're going to react differently. So it's extremely important to know how to handle who you have in front of you. Age, training, age, gender, body size, shape, past injuries, et cetera, all those play into effect the individuality of your strength training. Which is why it's like, I can't give you a program, because if I give you a program, this female and this male might do it and they're going to have a different response and they're not going to have success with the program, or they may have too much success and that could also run into problems. Well, not too much success, but too much overload. Okay, and then we run into specificity. If you're not familiar with this principle, the SAID principle is specific adaptations to impose demands. So the gist of that is, if you want to become good at something, you do that something. If you want to play basketball, you're not going to play football to be better at basketball. You're going to play basketball to be better at basketball. If you want to be better at a squat, you're going to squat. There's different variations, but you want to, that's exactly what this principle states, is whatever you impose to your body, that's what it will adapt to. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, and overload, extremely important. I don't know if you guys have seen, I'm not going to drop, but I don't know if you guys have seen the Greek story of the little boy carrying a bull on his shoulders up this hill, okay? As the bull that the little boy carried got bigger and older and fed more, did that boy get weaker, do you think, carrying up the hill, or stronger? Right? He got stronger. And this is a very broad term of how overload works, but as the bull got bigger, the boy got stronger. And we want to apply that same principle to strength training, whether that's increasing 2.5 pounds per week, 5 pounds per week. And again, that is also, take that with a grain of salt too, because you're not going to increase 5 pounds every week for the rest of your life, or else you would be insanely strong, right? And you're going to reach a ceiling. So so in the beginning, we want to overload the body, training with a greater stimulus than the body's used to. And the ways to overload, there's different ways to overload. Increasing intensity, and when I say intensity, that's increasing the amount of weight put on the bar in terms of strength. Increase volume. Volume is sets, reps, and reps and load also combined. So instead of 2 sets one week, 3 sets the other week. Instead of 8 reps this week, 10 reps, 9 reps, etc. Increasing the duration, so that could be the time under tension. If you're lifting at a 2-second up, 2-second down kind of thing, you can increase that duration. But at that same time, if you increase the duration too much, your intensity and volume is going to go down, because try doing a bicep curl 10 seconds up and 10 seconds down. Like it's going to be with like 5 pounds. And increase your frequency of training. So that's 1 day a week, go to 2 days a week, go to 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever. And progression and periodization is overloading at an optimal level and time frame. So going back to the LTAD, this long-term athletic development, this optimal level and time frame is you don't want to go too fast too soon, or else you may run into some issues. And you also don't want to go too slow, because then you're not progressing at the right speed for this person. Any questions on strength right now? No, you're good. You're good. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Good luck.
The overload and periodization.
Yeah.
What are your sets or workouts per week? Let's say you're doing 3 times a week. What are your thoughts on whole body workouts versus arm day and leg day?
Yeah, great question. So the question, I have to repeat this question for the video, but is if I'm doing, what's my opinion basically on full body versus upper body, lower body, or body part split, et cetera. So that's a great question. If you think of, the way that I would think about that is if they have, typically people will have maybe 2 to 4 times a week training. If they have 2, I'd go full body. If they have 3, I'd go full body. If they have 4, that's where you can kind of get a little bit more into the upper, lower. Because the way I think about this is if I go full body 3 times a week, the amount of more practice that somebody's going to have 3 times per week versus if you do an upper body 1 day and then maybe lower body 2 or something like that, that I want to involve, and this is for youth specifically, but I want them to be practicing the movement, the skill, whatever we're doing, far more frequent than not. So I would do full body 2 to 3, 1 time, 4. That's when you could probably go into upper, lower. Make sense? Did that answer your question? Okay. Anything else on strength? We're going to move on. Wow, everybody knows how to design a program? That's crazy. Okay, let's talk about conditioning. Okay, so there is, okay. What is conditioning? So we're preparing the body for the aerobic demand of the sport. So if we go back, I'm not going to go, and look at this, look how similar. The principles are the exact same as strength. So I'm not going to review them. Here are the benefits of conditioning, but we want to get specific. You're imposing whatever you're going to impose on your body to adapt to whatever your sport is. So conditioning. If you play tennis, if you play softball, if you play football, those are all completely different conditioning things you should be doing. So you want to, the demand of the sport is completely different. So how can I best condition my body for that sport? So if you think of aerobic conditioning, and I'm not going to get into the deeper parts of this aerobic conditioning, but if you've heard of tempo runs are a phenomenal way to aerobically condition. Now, if you play softball, you should not be aerobically conditioning because you're running 90 feet from home to first. You're in the outfield maybe running another 30 to 60 feet. You don't need a good base of aerobic conditioning to play softball. I can't think of another sport off the top of my head, but so aerobic conditioning. So football, soccer, lacrosse, track and field. You know, there's sports that do require that. And the best way to look at this is go and watch a game and maybe time. If you have a student that plays a sport, time how much they're working, how much they're sprinting. Okay, they're sprinting for 10 seconds. They're kind of sitting around. Like soccer's like this. Soccer is sprint repeatability. So this is another thing in terms of conditioning. A soccer player does need a good base of aerobic conditioning, but they sprint for 10 seconds, and they're waiting for 30 seconds, maybe walking, right? Because whatever position they play. And the positions change, right? So that's a whole other thing. So use work to rest ratios as it depends, depending on your sport. So again, go watch, go time, work, how much are they working, how much are they resting, bring that into the gym or bring that wherever else, and that's how you should be training them. Make sense? Okay. Okay, Alwyn, sprint repeatability. So sprint repeatability is, like I mentioned, if in soccer I'm sprinting as fast as I can and as hard as I can for 10 yards, I'm waiting for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and then I'm doing it again. I'm waiting, I'm doing it again, I'm waiting, I'm doing it again. So if you do 10 sets, 20 sets of that, that's sprint repeatability. Okay, and we're gonna talk about sprinting next. Okay, so agility, speed, plyometric. We're gonna break these all down, but first thing, speed work is extremely simple. It's an extremely simple thought process, but so many coaches get it wrong. And what I've seen, at least, is what these coaches do is they would have, I'm going to take football, for example. Now, I don't train any football players, and maybe that's for a reason. But I'm going to take football, for example, and what this coach will do is they'll say, okay, we're going to run 100 meters. We're going to, at the end of that 100 meters, you're going to sprint as hard as you can. You're going to go into burpees. You're going to go into these squats. You're going to go into these lunges. And then you're going to come back around and you're going to do it again with zero rest. Now, that is not sprint training. That's running the kids to the ground, making them throw up, maybe having this tough mentality, and that's not developing speed and developing sprinting. What you have to do, that's developing conditioning. Don't get me wrong. It may, like to a point, but it's not getting you faster. You have to rest. When you are training speed, so this kid right here, he plays lacrosse for Westminster. We're outside of my house because I have my gym in my house. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's in my basement. And I set up these lasers. They're 10 yards apart. We're doing a 10-yard fly-in. I'm having him start over at these bushes, which is probably another 20 yards back, and he's starting sprinting fast, and he's only getting faster through these 10 yards. And we're measuring his top speed. So I can assess in miles per hour how fast he's running, and that's just another baseline test that I would use for an athlete. So once he's finished sprinting, he's resting 3 to 5 minutes before he does it again. Because if I have him go back right away, chances are that time's going to be a lot less because he's fatigued. Even though he doesn't feel fatigued, trust me, this kid's probably like, yeah, I feel good, I feel ready, right? But chances are he is still fatigued. I'm having him rest a long time. A rule of thumb is for every 10 yards sprinted, rest 1 minute. So if someone's running 40 yards, that's equivalent to a 4-minute rest. And it may feel, for an athlete, it may feel like, what am I doing standing around? But I promise you that is sprint training, okay? Are agility ladders useful? Has anyone used an agility ladder in here? No? Couple hands go up. Okay, cool. So I'll tell you what agility ladders are not useful for, and that's to develop agility. Because, let me tell you why. Agility ladders, you know the pattern that you're going through this agility ladder. You know, it could be like a 2-in, 1-out kind of thing. This athlete knows what they're doing. When it comes to agility, agility is using your brain and going through whatever circumstance this coach or trainer or parent is going to put you through. So for example, something I would do is like I would have somebody, maybe I'd have 2 cones right here. I'd have 2 pathways for me to go. And I would have somebody stand on that end of the cones, and I have 2 lanes, okay? I'm running towards these lanes, and this person at any time can jump in a lane. And what I have to do is I then have to think while running to cut and go through a lane, right? That's agility because you're using your brain, you're thinking before applying whatever you need to apply. In sport, it's not like, oh, we know the ball's going to go there. We know this player's going to come here. We know that this is all going to happen at this moment. We don't know that. So agility ladders, what they're good for is developing rhythm. I'm not saying they're bad, but they just don't develop agility like people think they do. You need a thought process. Maybe if you're going through those agility ladders, throw a ball at them at the same time. So they're thinking about up here while they're going through this, you know, pre-exposed movement or predetermined movement. It makes sense on agility ladders. I'm not hating on them. They're just used the wrong way. Okay? Okay. My child wants to get faster. How can I do that? We talked about rest, but let's talk about speed. So if you have, I've drawn this so many times, look how good this runner is. Okay, so this is somebody sprinting. I know. So what sprinting is probably among the most beneficial plyometric movements you can do. Because all sprinting is it is ground reaction force in a specific spot. So when somebody's sprinting, okay, think about this. This is where physics comes into play. So when I'm sprinting, okay, Newton's second law, I believe it is. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But Newton's second law is equal and opposite reaction. So the more force I can apply in the ground, that same amount of reaction is going to come up. If I have a ball right here and I barely drop it, it's going to go dun-dun-dun-dun. But if I throw it, it's going to bounce up really high. Same thing applies to our foot, when we're sprinting, when we're jumping. If anyone's ever told you to have quiet feet when you're jumping, I would coach the opposite, because they're not applying force in the ground. You want to apply force horizontally to sprint fast. So we're thinking of pushing the carpet or the floor away from underneath you and as hard as possible. You have to apply force. And so if this person can only apply so much force, how do you increase the amount of force you can produce? Strength training, right? And this is, we're getting back to something, okay? So the stronger your legs are, the more muscle fibers you can recruit, the stronger your leg becomes at producing force into the ground, which is why I would attribute my vertical jump success to my powerlifting career, because I was trying to become strong. I can produce a lot of force downward into the ground, and I would consider myself to be pretty fast. If anyone wants to race, we can meet outside after this. But so yeah, this is sprinting. This is how we get faster. And if you're thinking multi-directional, because not a lot of sports are going to be straightforward, but if you're thinking multi-directional, if you improve this, that multi-directional will improve too. You think of like shuffles, you think of loading and getting off that shuffle. We're going to talk about what a true plyometric is. We can talk about that right now, because we're going to move into my child wants to jump higher. How can I do that? So thinking about what a true plyometric is, we probably got to go quick, huh? Okay. So what a true plyometric is it's a loading and it's a getting off that load in they say under 0.25 seconds or 250 milliseconds. So that's pretty fast. If you think of like a blink of an eye, that's like maybe 200 milliseconds, okay? So if I'm jumping down and I'm getting off, that would be a true plyometric. If I do a counter movement jump and I just stand here and I just jump, that would technically not be considered a true plyometric, but you can call it a plyometric if you want. But technically not. So sprinting is that exact thing. I'm coming down into the ground, I'm pushing off, and your sprinting ground contact time, which is the amount of time I spend on the ground, is very, 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 very fast. Way faster than 250 milliseconds. Okay, we're going to move on a little bit quicker so we can get to this Q&A. But okay, this is coordination. I can go through this extremely fast. We break this down into these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things. This is coordination. You can take a picture of this. Maybe I would. Again, it'll be recorded so you can kind of jump back and see this. And again, these are examples of exercises that I would do as it relates to each of these 7 categories. So single leg deadlift with a ball, bear crawl, bird dog hold. We're trying to do things that challenge the balance of somebody. Rhythm. Like I was saying, the skip for height, that could be in this rhythm thing, or skip for distance, sorry. A lot of younger generation, it's very hard for them to do. I have them gallop over hurdles. Having a kid gallop, first, they may not know what that is, but having them gallop is extremely challenging task for them. Okay, spatial orientation, rolling, crawling, roll to bear crawl, etc. Speed of reaction, dodgeball, love that. Rock, paper, scissors, sprint. That example is I have 2 people facing each other, rock, paper, scissors. I say, okay, we're going to go. When both of you shoot a scissor, then you sprint. This is agility 2. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. They both do scissor, and then they sprint, okay? So that's speed of reaction. You can call out, okay, you can do a sprint and say, when I say red, then you sprint. And you could play around with them. Synchronization of movement, dribbling through the legs while moving forward, throwing a ball in the air while moving like this. That's all having to do with coordination. Kinesthetic differentiation, deceleration, cone zigzags, ladder drills, etc. So this is where your ladder drills can come into play, because you're developing this rhythm and you're developing what your body does during these different movements through the ladder. And movement, adequacy here, the ability to move and accomplish tasks. This is essentially the sum of everything. All right? And I'm just going to touch really quickly on this. I could also talk for a long time on this. But this, as I already alluded to earlier, was programs in high school. So a lot of the times the sport coach is technically a strength coach at a high school, maybe because they can't afford hiring an outside strength coach, or I don't know what the reason is. Maybe they just think, oh, because I can coach football, I'm going to use a different sport. because I feel like I'm picking on football. But maybe since I can coach soccer, I can also teach them how to squat, deadlift, maybe clean and jerk, lunge, do a pull-up, do a chin-up, whatever that is. That should not be the case. You don't see me, strength and conditioning specialist, go out and try and coach soccer. I don't know anything about soccer, right? I can pretend to know anything, right? But I know that I do not know about soccer, and I'm not going to coach it. There are so many different factors that come into play. So many, especially a lot of the time. So it's the common things that happen in this setting is too much volume, too much intensity, improper instruction of the lifts, Olympic lifting at such a young age. Now, I'm not against Olympic lifting. I'm just for Olympic lifting under good technique and instruction. And then punishment workouts are another thing too. Maybe you guys have experienced this before, but it's like, okay, if you don't catch this ball, then you're gonna go run 10 things around the track. There is literally studies that show that is not effective, okay? So I'm not sure why they do that. It drives me nuts. And here's how you can make training enjoyable for youth. Look how happy they are with these things, enjoyment, fun, and variety. So you gamify. Gamifying is huge in youth. That makes it so much more fun for them. Get personal, build relationships, be their friend, create an environment that foster a learning in children. So you want to teach these children these things. I can teach them everything that I talked about in these slides, but I may dumb it down 2 or 3 levels, which is totally fine. But be their friend. That's another huge thing. Give feedback and ask questions to the kids. Oh, you play any video games? What video games do you play? You know, like all these things, like get personal with them. Kids love talking about themselves and hype them up for the little things. You know, they did 5 more pounds than last week. Great job, right? 2 positives to 1 negative. I learned this actually through dog training. So, and surprisingly or not, dog training is effective with kids too. But so it's like, you know, it's like, oh, they did a good job. Yes, good job. Like give them a knuckles, right? As similar to giving a dog a treat. Build character and build confidence. So back to that study that I alluded to earlier, building character is massive in younger kids. And confidence. I've had 2 parents the past couple months say, I want my kid to come work out because I need their confidence to improve. Great, come on in. Reward good behavior with a fist bump, with whatever, high five, right? Tell them, that was so good, that was so awesome. Look at them as a kid, not a basketball player, soccer player, etc., and play good music. This is huge because you want to make sure when that kid comes in, hey, what kind of music do you listen to while working out? Oh, I hate country, but I like rap, whatever. I don't know, like it could be anything. Okay. Let's go. Questions? All right, let's go here first, and then we're going to come back.
So
yeah.
Your full body workouts,
yeah.
If you do it 3 days a week, what should your rest be? Like 48, 72 hours rest in between the full bodies?
It's not necessary because it all...
Can you repeat the
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot. Can you repeat your question really quick?
Yeah, when you're doing full body workouts,
yes.
How much rest should you have in between those days?
Okay, so when you do a full body workout, how much rest should you have between those days? That matters on how much volume you're doing throughout those workouts. So if the way that I would do that, I'm just gonna throw this out there and you can take it how you want, but if I do 3 days, I may do a higher volume day on Monday, medium volume day on Wednesday, light volume day but higher intensity day on Friday. So I'm not same amount of volume all those 3 days. And goes back to the questions of asking these kids, hey, how you feeling today? Are you sore? Right? And then you can pivot right away if you need to. Did that kind of answer? Like, you don't need to take 48, 72 hours during that time unless they come in and they're like, my legs are wrecked. Then you can just pivot and do something else. Just do upper body. Just because it's written out doesn't mean that's the Bible, right? No pun intended because we're at BYU, but yeah, you can pivot. You can do other things.
What recommendations are there for supplementation?
Oh yeah, cool, good.
And then at what age?
Yeah, great.
Just a quick reminder, sorry.
Yes.
For the audience as well, if you'll repeat their question into the mic for the...
Yes. Did I repeat his?
Yeah. I wasn't sure.
I thought I did. Okay. So what sort of supplements are recommended for youth, let's say? So I'm going to first talk about creatine because that's probably a huge thing that maybe is in this world, creatine monohydrate specifically. Creatine is the longest studied supplement ever studied for supplements. Since the 1970s, I think it started. Were you going to say something? Or no? Okay. So creatine, though, taken by like an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, maybe isn't ideal. Really quickly, because I lost the marker under the thing. Okay, anyways. So really quickly, what creatine does is you have this muscle cell. Creatine comes into this muscle cell and it makes this muscle cell more hydrated, which is why people think, oh, I feel bloated. It's maybe why people think they're going to gain muscle from this. You may gain muscle, but you need calories to build muscle anyway. So if you're not getting the amount of calories, then you're not going to build muscle. The other thing is, if you have, you have this ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. That's energy. So as soon as I go like this, I just use the ATP. And ATP then gets used and it becomes ADP, two cells instead of three, or two phosphates instead of three. What creatine does is it comes in and it makes that third phosphate more readily available. So it just creates a better outcome for if you're performing at a higher intensity for a kid. Now, as far as age restrictions on creatine, I'm not sure. You can maybe dose them. You know, if you have an 8-year-old, I probably wouldn't do that. But if they start asking the question, hey, Dad, can I supplement creatine? Then educate them the right way. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Caffeine, probably not, because they're already crazy, right? Some kids. But other than that, like supplements are to supplement. They're not to use because you should try and tackle everything else first and then supplement. Anything else? Did that answer your supplement question? Go ahead. Yeah.
I have a question. When you're training for coordination, do
Yeah.
you try to pair up the skills that they're practicing with the sport, or do you find that coordination in general transfers to all sports?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it would transfer. It would, because that goes back to our long-term athletic development. Oh yeah, sorry. Coordination, is it specific to the sport? Does it transfer to all sports? Back to our long-term athletic development, work on your general first. I've had 2 kids that play lacrosse. I taught them how to juggle because, I mean, you have to be pretty coordinated to learn how to juggle. So maybe that affected their hand-eye coordination, right? Like all these general coordination things will affect specific, right? And is this your son?
Yeah.
So I would not get specific at his age at all.
Yeah.
He's safe, very general. Yeah. And his long-term athletic development will be so good, you know? Anything else? We got 5 minutes. Yes.
What are your thoughts on free weights as opposed to machines?
So this is going to go back to like what are my thoughts on free weights versus machines? I don't have any machines in my gym only because that would just take up way too much space. If I had machines, it may be a good idea, maybe something that I could use, but free weights are going to develop that coordination, and I would always put somebody a little bit more on a free weight. Now, however, I have seen that literature actually that is like at a young age to develop, maybe a pressing motion. A machine might be good and useful to learn this path of what they're doing and then put them on a free weight. But at the same time, if you know how to coach a bench press, you won't have any problems with that. Does that make sense? What is your thought?
I only ask because the school I coach at, I actually live northern Maine. The
Oh,
school
welcome.
I coach at, we don't have much.
Oh, yeah, cool.
The PE facility has a bunch of machines.
Okay. So when I first started my gym, all I had was a cement floor, a couple kettlebells, like a barbell, and it's all about how creative you can get with what you have. So if you have those machines, single arm stuff, double to single arm stuff. I don't know, try and be creative or try and get off those machines onto the floor, and you can do a whole lot on the floor. If you do if you do what's in that coordination slide, you can do that all off the floor, not on machines, and you're going to develop those athletes extremely well. Anything else? Oh, that was the same time. Let's go here first.
You don't have to take up time with this, but I have to build a speed and agility curriculum this next year.
Okay.
And so I just want to know, if you could give me some players on it. If that's in your repertoire or if I need.
Well, it is, but okay. So.
That's what I said. I don't want to take your time.
Yeah. So you're looking for a little bit of help on building a speed and agility.
Yeah, it's like that.
Program for what sport?
It's just an athletics course. It's like it's all.
So it's for all sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like anybody who's sophomore through a senior can take it as long as they're participating in a sport.
So then I think my first advice would be categorize those into different sports.
Okay.
Because and what age?
It's high school, so just sophomores to senior.
Well then, okay, maybe sophomore to senior. Yeah, you need to get a little bit more specific within each age group,
Okay.
and each training age.
Okay.
Because a freshman, I've trained freshmen that are very developed because I've developed them, and they may be up with the seniors. So think about this as what they do in college, for example. If you go to college and you work out, they're going to put you in different groups, freshman, sophomore, or like they'll categorize by training age, but you need different groups because you don't want somebody who's very experienced in a beginner group because they're not going to develop anymore. So, and then I'm going to leave it up to you to establish what you're going to do within those groups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just wondering, when you have a group of kids who say like just an hour every week, so it's not like, multiple times a week.
Yeah.
What is the best, how do you prioritize which conditioning things you do with them and help them be able to continuously engage?
Yeah, for sure. So if I have a group, how do I, sorry, say that again?
If they're only training like once a week.
If they're only training once a week.
How do we prioritize things that they can actually see gains on?
How do you prioritize things so they can continue to see gains on?
Yeah.
Okay. So it would definitely determine the group. Do you have a specific group in mind?
Yeah, so I'm an aerial silks coach, so.
Cool, yeah. My backyard neighbor, they have those silks, and it's crazy to see. But anyways, so you're an aerial silk coach. So what conditioning are you looking for with that?
Anything like pull-ups or holding your
Okay, so
that kind of stuff.
great. So I would repeat your question one more time just so I can get precise on
How
that.
do we prioritize what types of conditioning to do so that they can?
Yeah,
continue to
okay.
see progress?
So my brain goes a lot of different avenues with this, but time of the year, like let's say you have an in-season or off-season, that matters massively on what you're doing and how much you're doing. So that could come into effect. And are we good? Okay. So time of the year could come into effect. With silk stuff like that, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about like aerobic conditioning because how long does a thing last? Like an event?
A couple minutes.
A couple minutes. So, and you're mainly doing this pulling, you're mainly doing like rotating, stuff like that. So the priority could be, again, develop the general, because it's what age are they, what experience do they have? There's a lot of questions that you should ask before developing a program, and a lot more specific questions, because it's very hard to answer general. But your pull-up strength, your upper body strength should be your priority maybe. Do you use your legs a lot?
Not a lot.
Okay, so a lot of core work, a lot of upper body work should be a priority with that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and should you do like the same things every week since they're only once a week, or should you?
How old are they?
It depends, probably like 11, 10.
Yeah, for sure. 11, 10, yeah. Get them to do a chin-up and stuff first. That should be the goal,
Yeah.
you know? And yeah, you could do the same things every week, but then you want variation eventually, because your body's going to adapt to that, right? Think of a thermostat. If you set it to 72, it's going to get to 72 and it's going to stay there. It won't move until you add more heat in the room, and then it's going to start to cool down or whatever. Anything else? We're good? Okay, I guess we're cut. Hey, thanks for coming.